In a railway carriage in the forest of Compiègne, the same carriage where Germany had signed its surrender in 1918, French officials sign an armistice with Nazi Germany. 6 weeks of fighting have killed 90,000 French soldiers and 60,000 French civilians. 10 million people have fled south in the largest mass exodus in European history. Now it's over. France has surrendered. But across the English Channel, Winston Churchill announces Britain will fight on alone. In the war rooms of Berlin, when Germany's top generals hear this news, their reactions reveal everything about why the war would unfold the way it did. The victory parade through Paris begins at dawn on June 14, 1940. Wehrmacht boots on cobblestones, rhythmic and endless. General Wilhelm Keitel, 58 years old, chief of the High Command, watches from a staff car as German troops march past the Arc de Triomphe. He's been awake for 36 hours, chain-smoking through the night, waiting for this moment. Everything has gone according to plan. Better than planned. Poland fell in 27 days, Denmark in 6 hours, Norway in 2 months, Belgium in 18 days, the Netherlands in 5. And now France. France, the nation that held Germany at bay for 4 brutal years in the last war. France has capitulated in 6 weeks. Keitel allows himself a moment of satisfaction. The Blitzkrieg doctrine has worked beyond anyone's expectations. Fast-moving armor, close air support, breakthrough tactics that shattered defensive lines before they could form. The French and British armies, considered among the finest in the world, had been routed. In Berlin that same morning, Grand Admiral Erich Raeder, 64, Commander-in-Chief of the Kriegsmarine, sits in his office overlooking the Landwehr Canal. The morning dispatch sits on his desk, untouched. He's been staring at the same intelligence report for 20 minutes. British evacuation from Dunkirk, estimated 338,000 troops rescued, over 800 vessels, naval ships, civilian boats, fishing trawlers, pleasure craft. Operation completed June 4th. Raeder had expected perhaps 50,000 men saved at most. The British Expeditionary Force should have been destroyed on those beaches, should have been captured wholesale. Instead, they'd slipped away across the Channel, leaving behind tanks and artillery, but taking their men. He lights a cigarette, considers the implications. The British Army has been humiliated, yes. Driven from the continent, equipment abandoned. But the men are alive, the men are home, and men can be re-equipped. 300 miles to the south in France, Field Marshal Gerd von Rundstedt, 64, commander of Army Group A, the force that had executed the decisive thrust through the Ardennes, meets with his staff at a chateau near Charleville-Mézières. They're drinking champagne, salvaged from the chateau's cellars. Victory champagne. Someone proposes a toast to the Führer, glasses raised, Heil Hitler. Rundstedt drinks, but his expression remains careful, controlled. One of his younger officers, emboldened by wine and victory, speaks up. England will be next, Herr Feldmarschall. Another month, perhaps 6 weeks. Rundstedt sets down his glass. England, he says quietly, is an island. The room goes still. We've conquered a land campaign, Rundstedt continues. Brilliantly, I grant you, but invading Britain means crossing 21 miles of water. It means naval superiority, air superiority, and the British have both the world's largest navy and a formidable air force, now fighting over their own homeland. He looks around the room at faces too young to remember the last war. It means, he says, doing something Germany has never successfully done in 1,000 years. The celebration continues, but quieter now, less certain. None of them knew it yet, but that morning, June 14th, 1940, as German troops marched through Paris, the easy part of the war had ended. 3 days later, June 17th, Churchill addresses the House of Commons. The words reach Berlin by wireless within the hour, transcribed by operators who double-check the translation because surely there's been a mistake. We shall fight on the beaches. We shall fight on the landing grounds. We shall fight in the fields and in the streets. We shall fight in the hills. We shall never surrender. At Luftwaffe headquarters, Reichsmarschall Hermann Göring, 47, Commander-in-Chief of the German Air Force, reads the transcript and laughs. Actually laughs. He passes the paper to his aide. "Excellent propaganda," he says. "The British always had a gift for dramatic speeches, but speeches don't win wars. Aircraft do, and we have more aircraft." Göring had reason for confidence. The Luftwaffe had shattered the Polish Air Force in 3 days, destroyed the Dutch in hours, dominated French skies. They'd lost planes, yes, more than expected, but they had the production capacity, the training programs, the combat experience. He orders immediate assessment. How long to achieve air superiority over southern England? His staff returns with estimates. 4 weeks. 6 at most. Destroy the RAF fighter bases. Eliminate their radar stations. Break their defensive systems. After that, invasion becomes feasible. Difficult, but feasible. Begin preparations, Göring orders. Tell the Führer we can deliver Britain from the air. But in a different office, in a different building, radar reviews very different numbers. The Kriegsmarine has 10 destroyers operational. The Royal Navy has over 60. Germany has 7 cruisers. Britain has 48. Germany has 2 battleships ready for action. Britain has 12. The German surface fleet, built for commerce, raiding and defensive operations, faces the accumulated might of 3 centuries of British naval supremacy. Radar drafts a memorandum. Careful language. Professional assessment. Landing operations in England can only be considered in conditions of absolute air superiority. Even then, the Navy cannot guarantee protection of landing forces against the Royal Navy. We must assume heavy losses. He doesn't send it immediately. He refines the wording, makes it less pessimistic, more technical, but the core message remains. We don't have the ships. June 22nd, Hitler tours Paris. Photographs show him at the Eiffel Tower, at Napoleon's tomb, at the Trocadero. He's awake by 5:30 a.m., spends 3 hours seeing monuments, leaves by 9 p.m. The brief visit becomes famous. The Führer in Paris, conqueror of France. That same day, back at his headquarters, he meets with his military chiefs. Keitel, General Alfred Jodl, Chief of Operations Staff. Göring, Radar. The topic, Britain. Hitler expects quick consensus. France fell. Britain will follow. Logical progression. Instead, he encounters hesitation. Radar presents his naval assessment, speaks carefully, methodically, describes the channel's unpredictable weather, the tides, the narrow window for landing operations, describes the Royal Navy's overwhelming advantage. We need total air supremacy, Radar concludes, not superiority, supremacy. The Royal Navy must be paralyzed by fear of air attack before we risk crossing. Göring interjects, which the Luftwaffe will provide. Jodl presents alternative scenarios. Perhaps Britain, facing isolation, will negotiate. Perhaps Churchill will fall, replaced by peace advocates. Perhaps the bombing campaign alone will break civilian morale. Hitler listens, and something shifts in his expression. Not anger, not yet. Something else. Calculation, reassessment. Churchill won't negotiate, he says. It's not a question. No, mein Führer, Jodl confirms. The intelligence suggests Churchill has consolidated power. The peace faction in Parliament has been marginalized. Silence. Hitler walks to the window. Outside, summer sun on German countryside. Behind him, his generals wait. They're being unreasonable, he says finally. We've destroyed their army. Their allies have fallen. France surrendered. What do they think they'll achieve by continuing? No one answers. The question is rhetorical, but it reveals something. Hitler genuinely doesn't understand. The British decision makes no strategic sense to him. They've lost. Why won't they acknowledge it? This is the moment. Right here, in this silence, the moment Germany's military leadership begins to realize the war won't end on schedule. Keitel breaks the quiet. Perhaps a demonstration, mein Führer, a large-scale bombing raid. Show them what resistance will cost. Hitler turns back. Göring, how quickly can you begin operations? Immediately, mein Führer. We're positioning assets now. I can have Eagles over London within weeks. Then begin, Hitler orders. Break their air force. Break their will. Make them understand resistance is futile. The meeting ends. Plans proceed. But privately, in conversations after Hitler leaves, the generals speak differently. Rundstedt, brought in for consultation, is blunt. The British always fight harder when threatened directly. Bombing London will strengthen Churchill's position, not weaken it. Raeder returns to his office and drafts another memorandum, this one more urgent. I must emphasize that successful invasion is possible only if the Navy can be guaranteed conditions it cannot guarantee. Jodl writes in his diary that evening, "The Führer is convinced England will surrender after aerial assault. I am less certain." Throughout July, preparations intensify. Luftwaffe squadrons mass in northern France and Belgium. Barges are collected along the coast. Training begins for amphibious operations. Maps are drawn, beaches are studied, and the intelligence reports keep coming. Reports about British aircraft production increasing, about pilots training, about coastal defenses being reinforced, about a population organizing for invasion. One report includes intercepted BBC broadcasts. British civilians being instructed how to respond to German paratroopers. Home Guard units forming. Tank traps being constructed. A German intelligence officer reading these reports marks one passage and sends it up the chain. It's a quote from a British civilian recorded by an agent in London. Hitler thinks we'll fold because France folded. He doesn't understand that we're different. We can't surrender. There's nowhere to retreat to. This is it. We either win or we die. That's the choice. And we've made it. The officer's note in the margin. Assess as representative of widespread civilian sentiment. By late July, the operation has a name. Unternehmen Seelöwe. Operation Sea Lion. Projected start date. Mid-August, depending on weather and air superiority. Target beaches identified. Landing zones selected. Initial objectives defined. Everything is being planned. Everything except how to solve the fundamental problem. Britain won't quit, and Germany has no clear way to make them. August 13th, 1940. Adlertag. Eagle Day. The beginning of the Luftwaffe's maximum effort against the Royal Air Force. Göring gathers his air fleet commanders. The order is clear. Destroy RAF Fighter Command within 4 weeks. Target airfields, radar stations, aircraft factories. Engage and eliminate their fighters wherever found. The numbers favor Germany. More planes, more pilots, more experience. The mathematics of attrition should work. Should. The first week of attacks achieves results. British fighters shot down, airfields cratered, infrastructure damaged, but the British keep flying. Day after day, RAF fighters rise to meet each raid. Their losses are heavy, yes, but German losses are heavy too, and the British are fighting over their own territory. Pilots who bail out return to service. German pilots who survive crash landings become prisoners. By the third week of August, Luftwaffe intelligence officers start noticing patterns in the numbers. RAF fighter strength should be declining. It's not declining fast. Enough. Why? The answer appears in multiple reports, pieced together from reconnaissance and captured documents. British aircraft production exceeds German estimates. Significantly. Pilot training is faster than expected, RAF pulling pilots from bomber and coastal commands, retraining them for fighters. Radar allows early warning, letting British fighters scramble and position before German formations arrive. One intelligence summary, dated August 28th, states it simply: the enemy is replacing losses at approximately the same rate we are inflicting them. Göring reads this report, rejects it. Impossible. Our intelligence on British production capacity must be wrong. But the pilots flying the missions know the truth. They see it daily. Every raid meets opposition. Every mission faces coordinated defense. The RAF isn't breaking. It's adapting. September 7th. Decision point. The Luftwaffe has been hammering RAF airfields for 3 weeks. Fighter command is battered but still operational. Invasion timeline is slipping. Weather window is closing. Autumn storms will arrive soon, making channel crossing increasingly dangerous. Hitler orders a strategic shift. Begin bombing London, massive raids targeting the city itself. Break civilian morale. Force Churchill's hand through terror. The military logic is debatable, but Hitler's decision is partly personal. British bombers hit Berlin on August 25th in retaliation for accidental bombing of London suburbs. Small raid, minimal damage. But Berlin was hit. The capital, the symbol. Hitler promises vengeance. We will erase their cities. Senior Luftwaffe officers receive the new orders with mixed reactions. Some see it as necessary escalation. Others see it as strategic mistake. Stopping attacks on RAF infrastructure just when fighter command might be near breaking point. Raeder sees it differently. He's been watching the calendar. September already. October approaching. The equinoctial storms will make invasion impossible soon. He writes another memo to Hitler. Given current conditions, Sea Lion must be postponed until spring 1941. In London, as bombs begin falling on the city itself, Churchill broadcasts to the nation. The transcript reaches Berlin the next morning. Keitel reads it again, passes it to Jodl. We are fighting by ourselves alone, but we are not fighting for ourselves alone. Jodl stares at the words. He still thinks they'll win. He's mad, Keitel says. Their cities are burning. Their cities are burning, Jodl agrees slowly. But their air force is still flying. September 15th, later recorded as Battle of Britain Day. The Luftwaffe launches its largest daylight raids yet on London. Wave after wave. Fighter escorts, bomber formations. The intention, overwhelm remaining RAF defenses, demonstrate German air supremacy. RAF Fighter Command responds with everything available, every squadron scrambled, every pilot flying. The combat is savage. German bombers reach London. Bombs fall. Damage is done. But German losses are catastrophic. 56 aircraft destroyed. More damaged. The RAF loses 29 fighters, but most pilots survive. That evening, German intelligence officers compile the day's results. The math is brutal. At this loss rate, air supremacy becomes mathematically impossible. The Luftwaffe is bleeding itself out. September 17th. Hitler postpones Operation Sea Lion indefinitely. Official reason, weather conditions unfavorable. Real reason, it's not working. Britain won't break. The postponement is supposed to be temporary, until spring, until conditions improve. But in the minds of Germany's senior military staff, something crystallizes. Several things simultaneously. Britain won't surrender voluntarily. The bombing campaign has strengthened rather than weakened civilian resolve. Invading Britain without air supremacy is suicide. Germany doesn't have the naval capacity, even with air cover. The war won't end in 1940. And that means what? Raeder articulates it first in a private conversation with Jodl. If we can't invade Britain, and Britain won't surrender, then the war continues. With Britain active, any continental campaigns face strategic bombing, potential naval intervention, supply line interdiction. We're in a war of attrition now, and Germany doesn't have the resources for extended attrition warfare. He doesn't say it explicitly. He doesn't have to. If we can't beat Britain quickly, we probably can't beat Britain at all. And if we can't beat Britain, what's the end game? October brings darker assessments. British bombers hit German industrial targets. Not decisive damage, but symbolic. The war is coming home. The British can reach Germany now, repeatedly, indefinitely. Rundstedt, in conversation with his staff, poses a question. What was our strategic goal in the West? One of his officers answers immediately. Eliminate France as a threat, secure our western border, free resources for eastern operations. He stops, realizes what he said. Yes, Rundstedt says quietly. Free resources for eastern operations, which means the Führer always intended to go east. Even if Britain falls, he plans to attack the Soviet Union. Silence. And now Britain hasn't fallen, Rundstedt continues, which means any eastern campaign happens with Britain still active in the West. Two-front war. The exact scenario we sought to avoid. This is the real revelation, the thing they're all beginning to understand. The strategic situation hasn't just stalled, it's become fundamentally untenable. December 1940. The Blitz continues. London burns nightly, but London doesn't break. British war production increases. American supplies arrive via Atlantic convoys. British Commonwealth resources mobilize. Churchill's government stands firm, and in Berlin, in private conferences, Germany's military leadership engages in careful conversations, circumspect language, professional assessments that hint at larger concerns. Raeder presents naval strategy for 1941. His proposals focus on U-boat warfare, convoy interdiction, defensive operations. He does not mention invasion. Goering's confidence has dimmed. The Luftwaffe switches to nighttime bombing, safer for German crews but less effective strategically. A tacit admission, daylight operations cost too much. Rundstedt receives new orders. Prepare for redeployment. Where? East, direction, Soviet Union. He understands immediately. Hitler is moving on. Britain hasn't fallen, so he'll pursue other objectives. The Western problem remains unsolved, but operations continue anyway. This is madness. Rundstedt knows it, Raeder knows it, Jodl knows it, but no one says it aloud to Hitler. In January 1941, Jodl drafts a strategic assessment, carefully worded, technically professional, but the subtext is clear. The British continue to demonstrate resistance capacity beyond initial estimate. Their industrial production, combined with American material support, suggests extended conflict capability. The achievement of decisive victory in the West now appears dependent on factors outside military control. Political collapse in Britain, American neutrality, or Soviet non-intervention. Translation: we can't beat them militarily. We need them to quit for non-military reasons. Follow-up: they're not going to quit. Years later, in 1946, during Nuremberg trials testimony, several German officers were asked about the Battle of Britain and the abandoned invasion plan. Raeder stated, "It was my professional assessment that successful invasion was not feasible with the naval resources available. I communicated this repeatedly." Keitel claimed the postponement was purely due to weather considerations. Rundstedt was more direct. After France fell, Hitler expected Britain to recognize the inevitable and negotiate. When Churchill refused, there was no clear path forward. We had operational plans, but no strategic solution. But perhaps the most revealing testimony came from General Günther Blumentritt, Rundstedt's chief of staff, who was asked directly, "When did you realize Germany would not win the war?" He paused, thought carefully. "Personally," he said, "September 1940, when Hitler postponed Sea Lion. In that moment, I understood the war would not end quickly, and I knew Germany's resources could not sustain a long war against Britain, potentially America, and, if the Führer proceeded with Eastern plans, the Soviet Union simultaneously. The mathematics were impossible." The interviewer pressed, "Did you communicate these concerns?" "In professional military terms, yes. But there were limits to acceptable discussion." "Why?" because acknowledging we couldn't beat Britain meant acknowledging the entire strategic framework had failed. And in the Third Reich, one did not tell the Führer his strategy had failed. This is the answer to the question posed at the beginning. What did Germany's top generals say when they realized Britain would never surrender? Publicly, they said Britain would be defeated. That victory was certain. That resistance was futile. Privately, in careful conversations, in circumspect memoranda, in professional assessments hedged with technical language, they said they didn't know how to win. That invasion was too risky. That bombing wasn't working. That naval capacity was insufficient. That resources were stretched. That the strategic timeline was collapsing. They said, in dozens of different ways, using hundreds of different words, the one thing they couldn't say directly: we might have made a mistake we can't fix. In September 1940, on the day Sea Lion was postponed, Raeder stood at his office window overlooking the canal, the same window where he'd read the Dunkirk evacuation reports in June. 4 months, from total victory over France to stalemate with Britain. He'd served in the Imperial German Navy in the last war. He remembered 1917, 1918, the endless attrition, the blockade, the slow starvation, the eventual collapse. History didn't repeat, but it rhymed. He lit a cigarette and returned to his desk. Work continued. Orders were drafted. Operations proceeded. But the certainty was gone. 21 miles of water, that's all it was. The English Channel, less than an hour by fast boat. But Germany couldn't cross it. And because they couldn't cross it, they couldn't end the war in the West. And because they couldn't end the war in the West, everything that followed became inevitable. The Eastern Campaign, the Two-Front War, the eventual entry of America, the grinding attrition, the final collapse, all of it traceable back to this moment. September 1940. When Germany's top generals realized that Britain, battered and alone, burning under nightly raids, would never surrender, and they had no idea what to do about it.